Everybody, it is Lon.TV, and I am back again with the Ouya again because I just can't get enough of this thing for some reason, and it's partly because it fascinates me, and maybe that's the beauty of it, is that it doesn't really have a focus yet, that it is going to be whatever the development community and the community in general wants to make it into. And part of what attracted me to the Ouya was using it as a retro game station, some place where I can play all these old games that I used to play when I was a kid without having to hook up all my old consoles to get it going. And we are getting a lot closer. There's been a whole bunch of new emulators dropped into the Ouya store, and I wanted to show those to you real quick. So let's have a look, and I'll show you where to find them. So if you go into the store, and by the way, they just did an update of the Ouya, and the store makes a lot more sense now. So you just got to scroll all the way down to the genres and go over to retro, and you'll start seeing all these emulators in here. And there's this guy, he's doing these things free of charge. His name is Robert Broglia, and he just dumped a whole bunch of stuff into the store. A lot of things that were missing or weren't that great from other developers. So we have a whole bunch of new emulators to try out, and I'm going to show them to you, at least the ones that interested me the most. And while I do that, I'll tell you some stories about the ghosts of gaming past. So we're going to start with Robert's SNES 9X-EX. Now, you also have Super GNES, which is a good emulator too. It's got some neat features to it, but this one is free, and you don't have to pay for it. And it actually runs a little bit better, in my opinion, over the other ones. So, and I think that'll change as everyone optimizes their code and stuff. But here we have Turtles in Time running here. And what's cool is that all of the ones that Robert's written, and most of them actually, even the commercial ones too, they have the ability to save your state. So with these games, when they were first out originally, you had to you had to play through them, and if you didn't get to the end or you died, you'd have to start from scratch. And these things at least give you a little bit of an out where you can just hit the Ouya button in the center here and go to save state, and it'll actually save your the memory of the emulated machine. And when you come back, it'll boot right back up to where it was left off. So it's a little bit more helpful there. So this game was a pretty big deal when it came out because back in the early 90s, late 80s, like 89, 90. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game was a big deal. I remember dropping a lot of quarters at the local Dairy Queen for that one. And this one was a really, the next version of it, essentially, kind of a sequel. But the graphics are very close to the arcade. So pretty cool game. Looks pretty good on a good television. This is a really lousy TV, but you can see it. It plays very well. And it emulates the Super Nintendo quite well. And again, it's a free emulator. So pretty cool stuff there. We have a few other ones here we'll check out. Let's go take a look at the Nintendo 64. You probably have seen this one before on some other channels. This one's been out for a while. This is the MuPen 64 Plus AE. And it's a Nintendo 64 emulator. And again, we were able to save our state. So we're playing Mario 64 here, and this one works pretty good. It's a little bit slow, but nevertheless it works fine. And I think this is one of those things when they optimize the code as time goes on with the Ouya, we'll see better performance. But it does play pretty close to the original. Your only problem is dealing with the Ouya controller, which again I'm not that crazy about. But this is a nice fun game. This is funny because the Nintendo 64 was so hard to find when it came out. It was insane. We were trying to get one for my little brother at the time, and we ended up finding one, and we didn't want him to find it before the holidays, as far as like under in the closet, because we were trying to keep it from him until the appropriate time to give him the gift. And I ended up having this thing in my dorm room for a few months or a few weeks right during finals when I was in college. That was not a good not a good thing to have around during the college years there, but nevertheless I got through and passed with flying colors despite the distractions I had there. So so that's the Nintendo 64 emulator. We have let's see, let's take a look at the Game Boy Advanced emulator real quick. And I have loaded up the Super Mario Brothers 3 game that was out for that back in the day, and this runs really well, partly because the resolution on the Game Boy Advanced is pretty low, and we're running in 1080p now. But this is a really great emulation of the Game Boy Advance. It runs very nicely. In fact, it almost runs smoother than any other emulator I've played on the Ouya. So this one I'm really impressed with. So if you're a Game Boy Advance fan, you're going to love playing your Game Boy Advance games on here. So that one's pretty good. Let's see, we'll go and check out next. We'll just move down the line here. We got the Game Boy Advance emulator. This one was really impressive. This is a emulator of the PlayStation 1. Now this one this is a paid emulator, but you can obviously use it in demo mode like you can do with any other emulator on the Ouya, or any other program or game or app on the Ouya. And we're going to load up a, this is great, this is a bin and queue file. This is a game I own. This is called Destruction Derby 2. And I got this when I was in college. I actually skipped a day of classes when it came out. It was my birthday, so I was allowed. But you get the full experience here. You do have to download the ROM. So if you own a PlayStation 1, you can somewhat legally say you can own that. And we'll just let this load up here. Now what it's doing is it's loading a CD-ROM image that I have copied to this USB stick in the Ouya right here. So it plays a little cutscene at the beginning. This emulation has been, at least for this game, has been almost perfect. The speed is awesome. The game runs as fast as it did on the original. This was a really fast game for the time. This was 96 or 97 it came out. And it works, I'm really impressed with it. And you can, I'll just load up a quick race here and you'll see how it works. Actually runs faster off the flash drive here than it did on the CD-ROM at the original. Sound works great. The graphics are good. I haven't yet figured out how to get it into the 4:3 mode, which was how those games ran. So the screen's a little bit stretched here, but nevertheless, it runs fantastic on the Ouya. This is a real impressive emulator. Now, granted, you know, the PlayStation 1 is 15 years old at this point, I guess. But nevertheless, if you are a PlayStation 1 fan, these games will run extremely well on the Ouya. So this is a great emulator. This is a $3 purchase, so it'll bug you as you're playing to do that upgrade. And I found like it does this random stuff where if you don't pay, it'll turn the sound off and stuff. But you know what? If it's something you like playing, it's worth purchasing. So that one is really, really well done. Let's see. We did the Game Boy Color. We didn't do the Game Boy Color yet. So let's go pop into the Game Boy emulator. Now this will run Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. So we're going to go just continue the game I'm running here. Again, you can save your state. So again, this was one of those things too where if you ran out of batteries and you were like really far into the game, you were totally screwed. So this is one of the original games that came out for the original Game Boy, and this is Castlevania. And it's notable because even though it runs really slow, and it ran slow on the original hardware too, so I don't think it's the Ouya's fault here. But it ran slow, but it was like a real Castlevania game. It looked very close to the NES version. I think I bought this in 1989. It was one of the, again, not one of the launch titles, but it was very close to launch. And I remember picking this up at Toys R Us and playing it for hours. I had a long plane ride to Florida or something. I got to play it then too. So great game. Runs excellent, and you can play all your old Game Boy games on here now too. So that is worth checking out. All right, so let's move on to, this one's awesome. This is the Neo emulator. This is, again, by that same guy, Robert Broglia. It's a freebie. And we're going to go, let's just pop open Metal Slug 3 real quick. This is a NeoGeo emulator, and the video quality on this thing is just awesome. I was playing this on my larger television upstairs. Again, this TV is crappy, but really, really impressed with what he did with this one. The games look just vibrant. The sound is great. The speed is really good. It slows down occasionally in a few spots, but again, I think a little optimization will fix that problem pretty nicely. And this one is really good. I mean, it's probably the best I've seen. I'll let the demo kind of run here. You can just see how it works. Nice and fast, and really, really, really notable. So very happy with this one. So that's the Neo Emu emulator. Let's see, what did we forget here? Okay, PC Engine. Now this is the PC Engine, which was big in Japan, like many things are. It's also the Turbografx 16 in the United States. And this came out around the same time as the Sega Genesis, and you all know how that competition went. But it was always a very colorful game. The Turbografx had great color, a little bit less horsepower than the Sega did, which is partly why it didn't do so well here in the United States. But nevertheless, you can play all the games. This was the pack-in game that came with the Turbografx. It was Keith Courage and Alpha Zones. It was kind of a bizarre platform game. The control was never all that great, but the graphics are pretty cool. So, but this is really good. I played a few other Turbografx 16 games on here, and they all ran really well, as good as the original console did. And that's another one by our friend Robert Broglia. So this guy's making the Ouya valuable, I think. So that one was great. So now we'll move on to the NES MU. And actually, I don't know if I showed you the Super Nintendo one. So maybe I did do that one at the outset. We'll go over to the Nintendo emulator now. And we'll load up our recent games. And we'll continue a save game I had here. I had just died. So this is Super Mario Brothers 3. and as you can see, it runs great. And actually, this runs better than the Emua emulator, which was out first. And Emua, you know, it's kind of a neat concept. They've got like an app store for homebrew Nintendo 8-bit games and stuff. But the control wasn't as good, and maybe they'll fix it. But I found the control wasn't so good, and I also found that the video was just off. And I think they were trying to make it look close to what a CRT, you know, an old tube television would look like on your original or on your HD televisions, kind of make it look like how it was back in the days when I used to play these games. But it wasn't really doing it for me. So this one, again, by our friend Robert Bruglia, is doing a much better job of emulating the original Super Mario Brothers 3. So I was pretty impressed with that. And obviously it'll run all the other Nintendo games too. And man, what a great game this was. There was a video store that wasn't too far from my house that ended up they got a copy of the Japanese version of this game along with an adapter so you could play it on your Nintendo, your American Nintendo. And it was so awesome. We spent a whole weekend playing this thing. We thought it was so cool that we had this Super Mario Brothers 3 months before anyone in the United States got to play it. So we were excited about that, but then we had to bring it back because we didn't want to get late charges. So we got a couple more here to check out. The Atari 2600 emulator. This is awesome, and it's not hard to emulate an Atari 2600. I was doing this years ago on my Mac PowerBook in 1994, but nevertheless, it will let you play all of your old Atari favorites. This is the Empire Strikes Back. It is one of the awesome, in my opinion, one of the best and awesome games ever made for the Atari 2600. When I was in first or second grade, I used to play this for hours, and there really isn't anything else to it other than shooting at these Imperial walkers. And unlike the movie where you had to like wrap the rope around them, you can just shoot them over and over again. You can hit them in that weak spot there, and they blow up. Sometimes you get the force, and you become invincible for a short period of time. And then you also have to land down here to charge up your shields. See that? All charged up and ready to go back into battle until you get hit again by the Imperial Walker. So this game never ends. It just keeps going and going and going. But it for some reason, it just doesn't get old. And I keep playing it to this day. So fun game there. And I think we've got one more emulator to check out. Yep, we have the Mega Drive emulator. And the Mega Drive is also the Sega Genesis. And what we've got here is a version of Sonic the Hedgehog running here, and this runs great. I was really, again, Robert Bruglia wrote this one too, or at least ported this emulator over. It is pretty perfect. In fact, on my nicer television, it looked really nice. It looked as nice as the new port on the iOS. There's a guy that has been basically upscaling all the old Sonic games for Sega officially, and there's a version on iOS now of Sonic 1 that's really great. So if you're a fan of Sonic 1, buy that. The original one that they had on the iOS was really lousy. This new one is great. And this emulated version looks as good as that really nice enhanced version that is now on the Apple iStore. So great little emulator here for the Mega Drive also. So that's it. I mean, it's impressive. We're getting to the point now where this thing is becoming a legitimate retro game station, and I couldn't be happier about that, because that's what attracted me to the Ouya console, was the fact that they weren't going to restrict people from writing some of these emulators. You know, on my PSP, you had to hack it essentially to get it to run any of this homebrew software. And it's really cool that the Ouya folks have been kind enough to allow these things into their app store. I hope they don't get sued for it. But so far we are okay, and we'll see what happens as things develop further with the Ouya. So nice thing is they're starting to see some really great emulators coming into the store, so you don't have to sideload and shoehorn some Android apps in. It's running with Ouya enhanced versions of some great classic consoles. This is Lon Seidman. Thanks for watching. If I see anything else interesting with the Ouya, I will produce another video for you. As always, and I've really been appreciating all the comments you've been writing on all the videos I've done on the Ouya, so please keep asking, and I'll post some more videos with answers to those questions. The Ouya now is available to everyone. I bought the Kickstarter version, but now I believe as of tomorrow, or the day that you're going to see this video posted, you can order it on Amazon and in other fine stores. Thanks for watching.